We continue now at the top of Daf Samach Gimel Amid Beis Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 63b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a brayso in which Rabbi Yehuda says if one is bringing a minchas mafe, he can bring either all chalos or all rekikin, but he cannot bring half chalos and half rekikin. And now Rabbi Shimon goes and argues, V'chinemar korban shnei pa'amim. Does it say the word korban twice by this kind of a korban? It doesn't. V'halo lo nemar la korban echad. It just says one korban, but yet v'nemar bo chalos or rekikin. Yet the pasuk says chalos and rekikin, and so therefore meyata. Therefore we can say ratza lahavi chalos. Maybe if he wants to bring chalos, he can bring all chalos. Rekikin, maybe if he wants to bring all rekikin, he can bring all rekikin, all wafers. Mechza chalos or mechza rekikin, maybe, and if he wants to bring half chalos, half rekikin, he can do that as well. Ubolulon v'kometz mishneim. He mixes them and takes the komets from both of them. V'im kamatz v'yola biyado me'echad al shneim. Now if he does take a fistful and in his hand comes from one of them for both of them, so yotza, then he fulfills his obligation. Rashi explains, V'chinemar korban. Does it say korban twice? Echad lechalos ve'echad lerekikin. That would be one for the chalos and one for rekikin. To have a mashma deshnei korbanos him. That would be understood to be saying that there are two korbanos. V'halo lo nemar le korban echad. It just says one korban. V'afa bichein kasa bo shnei minin. Nevertheless, there are two types that are indicated over here. Alma shnei and nikroin korban echad. You see that they're both called one korban. Ubo'ulalan, then he mixes them. And that means that after he bakes them, Posasan, he crumbles them up, Uma'orvan, and mixes them Achemachzir and Lasultan until he returns it essentially to being like flour. Kedamar be'elam menachos, like we're going to say later on in elam menachos. V'yachakach bolulan ka'achas b'shemen. It says afterwards he mixes it all together as one in oil, and again after that he takes the kamitza, and that's how he fulfills that obligation. And the brayso continues, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda says, and we'll take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda ka'avua svirla. He holds like his father. He holds fundamentally like Rabbi Yehuda that he brings either all chalos or all rekikin. Kedim mefarish l'kamon, as will be explained. In any case, the brayso continues, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda says, Minayin lo Omer harei lai minchas mafe. From where do we know that if somebody says it's upon me to bring a minchas mafe, shelo yavi mechza chalos or mechza rekikin, that he shouldn't bring half chalos, half rekikin? Talmud Lomer, the pasuk says, V'chol mincha asher teyafa b'tanur v'chol na'aseh b'marcheshes v'al machavas lakoin ha'makrav oso lo siyah v'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chareva l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyah. So it talks about the mincha that's teyafa b'tanur, that's baked in the oven, and it talks about the marcheshes and the machavas, and ma v'chol ha'amur l'mato shnei minin chalukin, just like what was said below is two separate kinds. Af v'chol, so too the v'chol ha'amur l'mala, when it says v'chol mincha asher teyafa and v'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chareva, just like the v'chol that said below is two different types, so too v'chol ha'amur l'mala, the v'chol that said above by the minchas mafe, shnei minin chalukin. That means two distinct types. Rashi explains, Ma v'chol ha'amar lamata shnei minin, just like the v'chol that said below is shnei minin, meaning to say, Na'aseh b'marcheshes u'v'machavas. It talks about a marcheshes and a machavas. Shnei minin korban, those are two types of korbanu. V'mhevi mechsa mizeh lo yatz. If he were to bring half from this and half from that, he would not fulfill his obligation. V'chol mincha belula b'shemen v'chareva shnei minin hein. When it says v'chol mincha belula b'shemen, that is two types. So the point is, af kol shnei minin hein. So too, when it says v'chol mincha asher teyafa, it's two types. Kilomar chalos u'rekikin ho'amurim b'vayikra shnei minim. The chalos and the rekikin are two separate types. Ve'ein mitzdarfen, and one is not able to combine them. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, now Rabbi Yehuda, Shaper Kamar, Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is saying correctly, meaning to say, Rabbi Shimon is arguing, it doesn't say korban, it says one korban, and yet it says chalos or rekikin, so it does seem to be saying half and half is acceptable. As Rashi explains, Shaper Kamar Rabbi Shimon is saying correctly, V'chinemar korban, does it say korban? What is Rabbi Yehuda's response to Rabbi Shimon? And the Gemara continues and says, Amar Loch, he will say to you, Rabbi Yehuda will respond, Kevan d'chsiv bashemen. Since it's written in the pasuk bashemen, so command d'chsiv korban dummy. It is as if it says korban. Again, the whole argument of Rabbi Shimon was that it doesn't say korban. It's all one korban. But Rabbi Yehuda responds, no, it says bashemen. It says that twice, and therefore it is as if it says korban. Rashi explains bashemen hifsik ho'inyan she'ein boin ka'achas. It's essentially saying bashemen twice when the pasuk says matzos belulos bashemen and it says rikike matzos belulos bashemen. It says that twice, so it is as if it says korban twice. And the Gemara continues for Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon responds to this. He loksiv bashemen bashemen. If it didn't say bashemen bashemen, if it did not say bashemen twice, have amina, one might have thought davka mechza chalos or mechza rakikin, that it has to specifically be half chalos and half rakikin. Aval chalos lechudayu rakikin lechudayu emalo. But let's say just chalos or just rakikin. Maybe one might say that that is not acceptable. And so kamash malon. That's why it says bashemen twice, to indicate that is acceptable as well. One can either bring all chalos or all rakikin, or one can bring half chalos and half rakikin. And the Gemara continues and asks, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Hainu Avu, isn't Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda essentially saying the same as his father, Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda seems to agree with Rabbi Yehuda that it has to be either all chalos or all rakikin. And the Gemara says, Ika beinayu, there's a difference between them. Di'avad, after the fact, is a difference between them. And Rashi explains for Rabbi Shimon, and again Rabbi Shimon, he responds, Amar lachi lo kasa bashemen l'chol chad. He will say to you, if it didn't say bashemen by each one, hava minahol ve'ein hefsek, since there is no interruption, one might have thought davka kamer, that it specifically has to be mechza chalos and mechza rakikin, half chalos and half rakikin. And the Gemara said the difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda is ika beinayu di'evid. The difference is after the fact, meaning Rabbi Yehuda diyolef taima mikarban echad. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he learns, his reasoning comes from the pasuk that it's all one carbon, and so therefore again it's either all chalos or all rakikin. So di'eved keshero, so b'di'eved, after the fact, it is going to be kosher. And that means that according to Rabbi Yehuda, half chalos, half rakikin b'di'eved is still going to be acceptable. Rabbi Yossi, but according to Rabbi Yossi, the yolef mi belula v'chareva, he learns from belula and chareva. Ki hechi de belula dehi minchas nedava, just like belula when it's mixed, that's a donated mincha. The chareva, and then the dry one dehi minchas chote, the dry one refers to the mincha of the sinner, that's an obligation. Afilu di'eved, there, even after the fact, im irvan, if one were to mix those psulos, they would certainly be disqualified. Kedamar, like it says in the pasuk, lo yosim al Hashem, and you're not allowed to place oil on it. V'im some paslan, if he does place oil on the mincha that's not supposed to have oil, it's going to be disqualified. So just like over there, it's a problem with the eved, hachanami chalos or rakikin di'eved lo, so to over here, if it's going to be half chalos and half rakikin, according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, even b'di'eved, even after the fact, it is not going to be acceptable. Hadron aloch kol ha-menachos, we will return to you parakol ha-menachos. And this is the end of the 5th parak of Meseches Menachos. If you are enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 6th parak of Meseches Menachos. And the parak begins with the Mishnah. Rabbi Yishmael, Omer, Rabbi Yishmael says, Omer hayaba b'Shabbos mishalosh soin, the Omer on Shabbos, if it was brought on Shabbos, if it fell out on Shabbos, that's talking about the 16th of Nisan falling out on Shabbos, so then it would come from 3 saw. As Rashi will explain, the 3 saw were sifted until it would be fine flour of the best quality, that would be 1 isaron. Uvechol, now if it was a weekday, if the 16th of Nisan fell out on a weekday, mechamish, so then they would actually start with 5 saw of barley flour instead of starting with just 3. The Chachamim Omer, and the Chachamim say, Echad Shabbos v'Echad Chol, whether it's Shabbos, whether it's a weekday, doesn't matter. Mishalosh hayabah, it always comes from 3 saw. Rabbi Chanina Skan HaKohanim Omer, Rabbi Chanina Skan HaKohanim says, B'Shabbos haya niktzar b'yochid uv'magol echad uv'kupa achas. If it fell out on Shabbos, they would harvest it with 1 person, 1 sickle, and 1 basket. Uv'chol, but if it fell out on the weekday, b'shlosha, b'shalosh kupos, v'shalosh magolos, then it would be 3 people with 3 baskets, with 3 sickles. The Chachamim Omer, and the Chachamim say, again, Shabbos and Chol are the same. Echad Shabbos v'Echad Chol, whether it's Shabbos, whether it's a weekday, b'shlosha, b'shalosh kupos, or b'shalosh magolos, it's with 3 people, 3 baskets, and 3 sickles. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Yishmael, Omer, Rabbi Yishmael says, Ha'omer hayabah b'Shabbos, meaning, Im Chol Shisha Asr Lios b'Shabbos, if the 16th of Nisan fell out on Shabbos, Ha'omer ba Isaron mishlosha soin, the Isaron of the Omer would come from 3 saw of barley flour. Shayu Kotzrin Shlosha soin sa'orim, they would harvest 3 saw of barley, umenifin osan benofa, and then they would sift it in a sieve, ad shemanifin osan ad isaron mufchar, until they've got the choicest isaron. That's how they would have the finest barley flour. Uvechol, and if it fell out on a weekday, imchol shisha aser bechol, if it fell out on a weekday, the 16th of Nisan, so kotzrin chamisha saw, and then they would actually harvest 5 saw, umenifin mikol saw ma'at oso solas dak hayotze rishon, and again they would sift out that first amount of fine flour they came first, Shu Muvchar, which was the choicest, Umotziin Min Hey Saw in Isaron, and so from the 5 saw which they harvested, they would have an Isaron, Kedechsiv, as it's written, V'Omer Asiris O'efa, who, it says the Omer is an Asiris O'efa, and the Gemara will discuss exactly what the machlokas between Rabbi Yishmael and the Chachamim is. And Rashi continues, B'Shlosha, again on a weekday, everyone agrees it's done with 3 people. There's a machlokas with regards to Shabbos. Begimel Ma'golos, meaning with 3 sickles, Lefarsim Hadavar. The reason why it should be done with 3 people is we want Pearson, we want to spread the word, we want to do this publicly, Mipnei HaBaitusin, and that's because of the Baitusin. That's going to be discussed in the Gemara, that the Baitusin had a different calculation in terms of the bringing of the Omer. And the Gemara says, B'Shalom Rabbanan. Now I understand the opinion of the Rabbanan. They say, Echad Shabbos v'Echad Chol. It doesn't matter. It always comes from 3 saw. So Kasavri Saron Muvchor B'Shlosha Saw in Asi. They hold the choicest Isaron can come from 3 saw. V'Loshna B'Chol, V'Loshna B'Shabbos. It doesn't matter weekday or Shabbos. It always comes from 3 saw. That's why they make no distinction. El Rabbi Yishmael, but Rabbi Yishmael, my Kasavri, what exactly does he hold? Ikasavri Saron Muvchor Lo Asi Eli Michamish. If he holds that a choice Isaron can only come from 5 saw, so afilu b'Shabbos nami. So even on Shabbos also, it should be 5 saw. And the Gemara continues, imi shalosh asi. Now if he holds that a choice isaron can come from just 3 saw, so then afilu b'chol nami. So then even on a weekday it should just be 3, and it shouldn't be 5. Why does Rabbi Yishmael make a distinction between the weekday and Shabbos? And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Kasav Rabbi Yishmael holds, Isaron muvchor below tircha, asi mechamish. An Isaron muvchor, a choice Isaron, without extra effort, it will really come from 5 saw. Really 5 saw are needed. However, betircha, if somebody takes the extra effort, so asi mishalosh, then one is able to produce that Isaron muvchor from shalosh, from 3 saw. And so therefore, bechol, on a weekday, ma'asin mechamish, so then we bring it from 5 saw. Dahachi shvicha milsa, because that's going to be better. But on Shabbos, where we want to minimize the amount of malacha, mutav sheyarbe b'malacha achas b'harkad, it's better to increase 1 malacha, do more sifting in order to get that fine flour. But v'yal yarbe b'malachas hari, but don't increase other malachas a lot if you're going to do 5 saw. So that means all of these malachas are going to involve more saw. You're going to have to harvest more, etc. And so therefore on Shabbos we want to minimize that part. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabba says, Rabbi Yishmael benoshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Amru davar echad, they essentially say the same thing. The Tanya, as we learned in the following Brisa, Arba Asr Shecholios b'Shabbos, if the 14th of Nisan falls out on Shabbos, Mafshit es HaPesach ad HaChaze, Divrei Rabbi Yishmael benoshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. So then, you flay the korban Pesach until the chaz, until the breast. You don't want to do it more than necessary. That's what Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, says. The Chachamim say, Ad sheyafshet es kulo, you flay the entire thing, even though it's Shabbos. And so Milo Amar Rabbi Yishmael benoshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, isn't Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, saying, Hasam over there, Kol Heichad de Efshar lo tarchinon, that as long as it's possible, so lo tarchinon, we don't want to do more when it comes to Shabbos, we try to minimize. So Hachanami here also, Kevan de Efshar, since it's possible, so lo tarchinon, so we don't want to do more malacha on Shabbos. But the Gemara continues and asks me, Mai, how do you know they're really saying the same thing? Dilma maybe Adkan lo Kamar Rabbi Yishmael Hacha, maybe Rabbi Yishmael only says it over here, Ela deleka bizay in kachim, it doesn't involve any disgrace of kachim, and that's why Rabbi Yishmael says over here that we minimize the Melecha Shabbos. Aval Hasan, but over there, Deika bizayin kachim, if we're going to do it in the manner of Rabbi Yishmael benoshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, there would be a disgrace to the kachim. And Rashi explains, Afilu b'Shabbos nami, again, then it should be true on Shabbos as well. Why would we make a distinction? Laisi do dochi Shabbos, because this Melecha is docha Shabbos, Kedem Mefarish b'Sof Pirkin, as will be explained. So again, the question of the Gemara and Rabbi Yishmael was, if one needs 5, so even on Shabbos one should use 5 saw. And the Gemara ended up answering, below tircha, 5 with no effort, meaning sheino tzarach lenafos kol kach, you don't need to do so much sifting if you have 5 saw to get that isaron muvchor. But if you have 3 saw betircha, then it's going to take more effort. Sheinfu pamam harber, you're going to have to sift more. And so bechol ma'asin and mechamish dahachi shvicha milsa, on a weekday we have 5 saw. That's better. Kach meshubach hadavar, it's better, it's preferred to have isaron muvchor tvei. It's going to be a choicer, it's going to be a more choice isaron. Shein mamsi mikol saw elamat. Each saw you're just going to take a little. Oso solas dak hayotzi rishon. You're just going to take the finest flour that comes out first from every saw. But mutav on Shabbos, mutav sheyarve b'malacha achas. It's better to do one malacha more, meaning mutav sheyachalel. It's better to desecrate Shabbos. Po'amim harbe Shabbos b'malacha achas. You'll do one malacha more times. Kagon sheyirkad agimel soyin. Po'amim harbe. You'll have 3 son. You'll sift it many times. That's the idea. You'll do that one malacha more times. It's better to do that. V'al yarve b'malachas harbe. Not to do a lot of different malachas, meaning sheyiksor v'yizrev v'yivor v'yitchin v'yirkad. That would involve the harvesting and the winnowing and all of the separating, the sifting, etc. Shtei saw and yosef for an extra 2 saw. That would be more problematic. And the Gemara then brought the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael ben Oshel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka when it comes to Karban Pesach. If the 14th falls out on Shabbos, you're mafshit, you flay the Karban Pesach until the chaz, until the breast. Rashi says, Ad ha-chaza sheyochel lahotzi asay murim. That's enough to be able to take out the sacrificial portions. And so the idea is lo tachin on Yosef b'Shabbos. We don't want to do more effort on Shabbos, more violation, so to speak, on Shabbos. But then the Gemara said maybe there's a distinction because there's a bizayon kachim. There also is the issue of bizayon kachim when it comes to the Karban Pesach. Chetz yom mufshad v'yomid kachar alayla. It's going to half of it's going to be flayed and stay that way until the night. V'doma kin avela. It looks almost like an avela, as if the animal died on its own. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Dalid Amid Aleph.